Hello, it's Patomini coming to you from New Orleans, where I am currently finishing my thesis in media archaeology. Very exciting, emerging new field. And as I mentioned before in some of the other recordings, this past weekend I attended the Tom Bird writing workshop. And it's a workshop that promotes itself as writing a book in a weekend. and Tom is, you can go check out his site, tombird.com. And it's just how it sounds, TOMBIRD.com. A childhood friend turned me on to Tom. So she works with Tom, and she saw something that I posted, and she said, "You should write a book." And I'm like, "I get that a lot." And she said, "Well, I work with this guy, and you can do it in a weekend." And I did an online workshop with Tom back in December, in which he introduced the technique, and then and it was powerful. It was very powerful. Because he gets you in a state where you're writing from your subconscious. He uses meditation. And he uses music to help you stay there with the subconscious and allow the information to come through. So it's really more like taking dictation, because you release all fear and doubt about what you're writing, and you just write and write and write as the words come. And it goes fast. And he will stop you every once in a while, have you count the words, because he wants to get you going into such a flow. And you can do that by kind of checking the speed in which you're writing. And you do handwriting at first. Until you're really there, communicating with your subconscious. It's a left brain, right brain kind of thing, and in order to shift over from left brain to right brain, so that you're not critiquing what you're writing. You're just writing. And so when I did the trial workshop last December, I'm doing it's all handwriting, and I'm writing. And it was pleasant. I had a really nice experience. I told my friend after the fact, like, yeah, that was cool. I can see how that would work, especially if they help you, sustain and maintain, the pace of it. So I said, yeah, I want to do the workshop. It's just that I'm leaving. I'm going down south, and I'm working on my thesis. I'm doing some research, and I'll let you know, because they have several throughout the year. He hosts them in Sedona, Arizona, where he's based. And oftentimes they'll do a mixture of online and conference style, like at a hotel or something, and they'll have some people online and some people on site. This one that I did just last weekend was their first trial to do all online. And they had people from all over the world. There was like a couple hundred people signed up. I think more than 100 people showed up. And it lasted, 4 days, and I now have a book that it needs revision, but I have a book. I mean, I actually have the pieces, and it was an interesting process for me because I started writing on this maybe 8-10 years ago, and I was using the hero's journey outline, and I was doing a memoir where I would, from childbirth, 68 and upward, and I'm flowing. The hero's journey outline, you can find it online. Go to Wikipedia. They have a long form. It's about 17 different story breaks. Where it moves from one to the other. It could be like finding the mentor, or refusing the call, or meeting with the goddess. And it's fascinating how in their description of what occurs, and this is the same format. Yeah, I'm assuming everybody knows this is the same story format you're going to find in Lord of the Rings and Star Wars and whatever, all films follow this, because there's something in the flow, that narrative flow that we really respond to. It's that story arc that that kind of builds and builds and peaks, and then kind of comes down a little bit, and you end up with your happy ending, or your open ending, or your tragic ending, however you want to end it. Tom's technique is, as a filmmaker, I could really respond to Tom's technique, because in the editing process is very much like, say, when I do documentary, I'll go out and and it's really based, I'm interested here, I've got this interview, I'm going to do this, and then you take all these elements together and you bring them into a story. So basically you just, like oftentimes I'll use the hero's journey format in order to bring all this content into a story. and that's essentially what you're doing, over the course of these 4 days is you're just allowing everything to come through and you're communicating with the book. I mean, if you get stuck, you can just ask the book within this form of writing. You can ask the book what else it needs to say, and you can ask the book to give certain information, and it's there. It's really, really there. Now, I've certainly written in these states before, and what I find, because I've had times to do a lot of writing. I'm finishing a grad program. There's a lot of writing required at my school. I definitely have days, where I'm totally in the flow. I set up a nice environment for myself, and I've done a 20-page paper in a day. It's 8 hours, quiet space, focus on my writing, and it flows through. And I have something that only needs revision. So I've been in these states before, and I'm open to this. And I have a regular meditation practice, which I believe helps, because he starts off with some visualization and meditation, and the music that you're listening to as you write is very meditative. And they give you a lot of support, because some people do get stuck. And they give you a lot of support, and they use drawing as well to help move through any kind of blocks. There's like circular drawing. There's a circular drawing practice that's very effective, in which you can ask questions and brainstorm and get the creative juices going. And leading up to the retreat, they give you assignments to do, and you can post online how that's going for you, so that you're preparing all along. So about a month before the retreat, which just happened this last weekend, August 24th, about a month before, I started doing the exercises and posting some of them to the online group in preparation. And I decided to do it remotely. And so I signed up for this one. Actually, my friend, my childhood friend, I have to thank Sabrina for offering this. Sabrina sort of popped up on a Facebook feed of mine about a year ago, and we actually hadn't talked in 30 years, so since high school. So we had a nice reconnection to find out like how her life's developed, and she there was no pressure in the sales of this. She just said, "Hey, I'm doing this, and you might be interested, and why don't you try it?" And I did, and I was interested, and then later on, she came back to me, and she's just like, okay, we were doing this all online one. And I finally, in my moving around, doing my research, I finally found a space where I can really write. And it right at that time, Sabrina, thank you, said, look, I'm going to stop, like telling you when these are, and I'm just going to sign you up for the next one. And and I was like, wow. And she said, it's on me. And very, very generous, because I think the workshop's a few, maybe as much as $500 or something. She said, you can pay me back by writing your book. Because I was like, wow, that's so generous of you to offer that. So thank you, Sabrina. For coming out of my past and onto my Facebook feed and coaching me, encouraging me, along this last year to do this. In my original writing temp, using the hero's journey, as I was saying, I was just going really quickly along from 1968 to about 1995, and I got stuck in 1995, and in that time of writing. And for years, it's been like, how do I move past it, or how do I move beyond it, or how do I reintegrate what happened so that I can actually contextualize it. And the last many years has been doing that. I mean, some of it involved moving back to New York was part of it, and creating new memories as well, reconnecting with people from my past. That was a big part of it. And also just work I needed to do on myself. So I can highly recommend Tom Bird's workshop. He believes everybody has a book inside of them waiting to come out. And he's a sincere guy. I have a lot of respect for the process he's developed, and he really wants to not just teach people how to write better, but also coach them through the industry of publishing. He has another program where he will help you get published and help you, really be a working author. If you want to go that far with it, and he believes anybody who really has the desire to do it and moves in that direction, they can accomplish it. So a great coach, a great program, highly recommend. There is one thing that I wanted to talk about that came up in the writing, and it in the writing, I have to say, one of the more pleasant and surprising aspects is just the amount of love and support that comes through in these states. Because when I would get kind of stuck or whatever, I would get messages like, "You're doing great. We're all here with you. We love you. Keep going." And I'm like, "Okay, this is nice. I'll keep going." So in speaking to that, this voice became very prominent, and I started sensing this voice coming prominently to the forefront as the day approached. It started coming a couple days before, and I realize now why, because I think I would have been too resistant before that. And it has to do with with Ra and the collective intelligence of Ra and these sort of communications, and it also has to do with an inner stand, an inner knowing that I've been working with for a long time, and it's all associated with my naming. My naming occurred in part because ever since I was a little kid, I always knew that that wasn't my name. So part of my hero's journey, part of my search has been to be like, what's my actual name? I got a really sweet, nice name from my Irish grandparents. They encouraged my parents to name me something when I was first born. My paternal grandparents, and I had that name, and that name carried me along. And yet, as a young child, when I started school, and people are, you have to introduce yourself now. Who are you? Da, da. Suddenly, it's no longer like I'm responding to a name. I'm actually saying a name, and I'm introducing myself. And when I'm introducing myself, I'm having a very weird experience where I'm saying my name, but I feel like I'm lying, and I'm a terrible liar. I'm a better storyteller than I'm a liar. Like, I can exaggerate telling a story. But if you just straight up ask me a lie, it's like all right here. I'm like, like I don't, there's just not a lot of filter there. So here, people are asking me my name, and I'm this little kid, and I'm like saying my name, and I feel like I'm lying. There's this internal conflict, and it's just very odd. I mean, are people supposed to feel like they're lying when they're asked to say their name? So I came to this conclusion early on that it's not my name. That I would have another name later, not knowing what the name would finally be. And because I'm an artist, and at that time I was in the performing arts, doing more stage and theater at the time, a lot in my youth, and film work early on, and eventually went into broadcasting and expanded there as well. So I figured at some point in my career, understanding the industry, like say if I got an acting role and I wanted to get into a union, you can't have the same name as someone else in the union. You have to have a unique name. My name wasn't terribly unique in any sort of way. It was two very common words, the first and the last. And I knew that somebody already had this name. They would have had it. This is too common. It's not as bad as John Smith. It's not as common as that. So what occurred was I just was like, well, it's going to change at some point. I'll have to change it professionally. No big deal. So I'm not worried about it. I'm not even thinking about it. But it's there in the back of my mind that my real name is coming. So it's years though before I find myself in a sweat lodge ceremony. A friend of mine, his partner was the intercessor pourer, and he invited me, and it seemed like a very interesting ceremony, and I went and I attended, and it was beautiful, and the songs were coming out of me, and I was like connecting, just very connected with whatever was going on in the ceremony. And these songs are coming through me that I've never heard. I'm singing them. They're coming out of me. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful experience of surrender and connection. And afterwards, I was so moved by the ceremony, that I befriended the medicine person, and I asked if I could continue my studies. And that was back in the late 90s. And this opened the door to my meeting and learning from all these wonderful Native elders from all across the United States. Because eventually, my spiritual interests in Native intelligence and Native wisdom eventually expanded itself to start including my media background, and I started working in the field, recording these stories for many years in the field of Native elders. And I learned all of this American Turtle Island history from these elders, so I have a very just different perspective, of anymore. It was great to kind of I didn't pay attention to history when I was in high school, and I was just like, it's all bullshit. So this was the real history class, very, very powerful. And one of the key things that I learned in terms of their resilience, because the elders that we were talking with had been through a lot. Many of them had been to the boarding schools, forced to the boarding schools, and where they tried to extract every aspect of culture from them, and they were able to heal themselves from very extreme conditions, heal themselves by reclaiming their culture, reclaiming their ancestral stories, reclaiming their histories, reclaiming their personal identities, and reframing themselves and asserting themselves in a self-determined way. And so part of my thesis work that I'm conducting is, as I'm conducting it on myself, I'm doing similar types of research. I'm uncovering wonderful family stories, and I'm following where it goes, and it's an exciting journey. It's a lot of fun. So in the course of my studying along this path, I had a naming ceremony. I had received a name in English. It was a kind of a long name. It was many years ago. It was during a time when I was really just first, really awakening and opening up and following my intuition. And I had this guidance, and I was given this name that was sort of keep me moving forward. Essentially, it was like a footfall name. I was like da 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 da, and it would keep me going, and it did, and it kept me going until such a time that then I was guided. This is about 2000. I was guided to request a naming ceremony, official so in the Lakota tradition, one of their 7 sacred ceremonies, and this name came through, Patamani, and there was some disagreement for many years between Native elders that I met on the exact pronunciation of my first name, PETA, which was never a written down name anyway. So it's because it's a Lakota word and it means fire, and so there were different sort of inflections that I heard. Like some people pronounced it Peta, some pronounce it more Peta, and linguist friends of mine, and eventually a medicine person that I studied with, pronounced it PTAH, and they said no, the emphasis is on the second syllable. It's PTAH, it's not Peta or Peta, it's PTAH. So I looked this up at the time. I Googled something about it. It's a long while back when I started using this in Hawaii. I used it the whole time I lived in Hawaii for many years. I went by PTAH. And in fact, the medicine person I studied with, she just like, that's the pronunciation, and that's how if you're going to study with me, then I want you to use the correct pronunciation, the one that that she determined was, and I did, no big deal. And because actually I really resonated with the energy. It was very powerful, and I spent several years in Hawaii really being in a very powerful, positive, flowing space of manifestation, and in my reflecting during the writing, I think the power that this name has, because it has old roots, Egyptian roots, and Ptah is the creator god, Egyptian creator god, and he's depicted oftentimes, as green with like a blue hat, and he holds special symbols, one of which has to do with DNA, which is perfectly aligned with what I'm doing, which has to do with the DNA strands and the Ankh and internal life. So it's very resonant with me, and it came up very strongly because since I left Hawaii and I had the opportunity to kind of choose my own pronunciation, because Spirit said, "It's your name. You can ask how to have it pronounced. It's yours. It's yours." So I decided to go back to the first pronunciation I received, which was Peta, and I've been using Peta for the past many years because it instills a sense of warmth in me, and I like that. It felt just very like a hug, and so I've been using that, but what came up in this writing is the importance of actually using the correct pronunciation and connecting with that power, because Ptah as an archetype, being a creator god, and as I've talked about before, these sort of framing realities from these archetypes. We do this already. If you look at the people with the wristbands, like, what would Jesus do? It's a similar thing. You're thinking to yourself, like, well, if I were Jesus in this moment, like, how would Jesus respond? And then you start, responding as Jesus would. There are there are so many different archetypes that you can choose to frame your worldview from. So right now, years ago, when I looked up Ptah, many years ago on the internet, I didn't really come across a lot. Now I'm coming across a lot because I just finally, in the last week, Googled it again, found all this different stuff that really enriched my understanding of the archetype. And so now and then it was affirming and as well to say that all of us have this creator spirit within us. All of us have this creator God within us, that Ptah is within us. There's this interconnectedness. And that's really what came through strongly in the retreat and in the writing. And now I have a book to revise. And I'm just so thankful again to Tom Bird and the crew for making this my reality, for working with me to create this reality with me. And I'm going to end it right there. I'm on a radical self-care day. A lot of stuff came through, but I really wanted to, while I still was feeling the energy of the retreat, make this recording. So thank you very much, everybody. Namaste. Thank you for listening, and I wish love and blessings to all who receive this message. I'm going to quote Abraham Hicks and say, there is great love here for you. And there is. There definitely is.